Grown-up conversations with people who know their stuff as ever here on The Money, and I'm talking today to the retail expert Kate Hardcastle. She's joining us from the US. Great to have you with us, Kate, as ever. And there's another Kate, the CEO of UK Hospitality. That's Kate Nichols, returning to On The Money. And in the studio, Jasmine Birtles, our very own MissMoneyMagpie.com. Here she is. An expert, a doyen of all consumer and personal finance issues. Welcome to you all. Let's talk to you first, Kate Hardcastle, if we may. Are you surprised that UK retail sales actually fell in March compared to February and fell as much as they did?
I'm not surprised, and hello to everyone on the panel. I think it's very important to understand that we buy emotionally, and it makes complete sense, therefore, that if consumers are concerned about the way that their finances are going, they're going to make methodical steps in terms of trying to rein it back in. It doesn't mean that the end is nigh. Of course, we will start to see times again when consumers feel confident and will start to spend, but very much the focus is about the cost of living. Every headline was about the fuel crisis, the clarity was at the petrol pumps, the clarity was at the bills coming through the door. And we have to understand that as retail and hospitality and any service element that gives to the consumer an offer of goods or services, it has to understand that. It has to fluctuate with what consumers want, and you have to appeal to the appetite at that specific time. So if consumers want value, that's what you need to talk about. And if consumers want to feel that they're having a good time and they want some luxury, you have to appeal in that way too. So it makes good sense. That's the way that the retail revolution's always gone.
Let's turn to Kate Nichols, who is the CEO of UK Hospitality. Kate, I'm just looking at the fine print of this ONS, Office for National Statistics data. It shows that food store sales were down 1.1% and spending on alcoholic drinks in stores and supermarkets shrank by 11.3%. But that's partly because, or you can tell me if I'm wrong, spending on food in pubs is going up, spending on alcohol in pubs is going up, and hotels and other hospitality venues. Is that what you're seeing or not?
I think you are seeing some of that in March. January, February time, we know is the time that customers don't tend to go out to hospitality. People do tend to stay at home. But March, they start to come out. The weather gets better. People do go out and socialise again. So I think some of the trends you're seeing, you're absolutely right. In the March figures, you are seeing a transfer of spend across into hospitality. It's a slight uptick in hospitality numbers and footfall. It is still well below 2019 levels in terms of volume and footfall into hospitality, but there is some transfer. I think what you are seeing here, though, and any anticipated slump that we got in retail sales to take account of that change, this is a far bigger slump than was being forecast. So people were anticipating you would see possibly 0.3, 0.5% slump in retail sales as some of the online experiences moved to be in-person experiences in hospitality. This is a much bigger slump that talks about a hit to consumer confidence, suggests that there is greater fragility, and suggests that that discretionary spending on which our economic recovery depends is quite fragile, and that we may see that being translated through into lower hospitality sales as we go forward in April, May, and the cost of living really starts to bite.
Indeed, it is a bigger slump than we thought. Just to repeat the numbers for those joining us in the last few minutes, UK retail sale volumes fell 1.4% in March and online sales were down 7.9%, less what we call discretionary spending on non-essentials because the cost of essentials themselves are going up so much, not least fuel and food. Jasmine, you run MoneyMagpie.com. You deal with queries from an awful lot of consumers, shoppers, spenders. Were you surprised by this number to the extent that I was?
I wasn't, to be honest, because, what we're hearing all the time is that people are very worried, as Kate Hardcastle pointed out. There's, it's an emotional spend, but it's also pounds and pence, because when you've seen your energy bill more than double, when it costs you more than £100 to fill your car with petrol, that actually makes you think, I really have to rein back my spending because these actual numbers are far bigger than I've had before. And also, of course, we do know already that people are using buy now, pay later schemes to just buy the basics. And we've had news from Nationwide that credit card spending is up again on the basics. So, yeah, as we've heard, the discretionary spend, which our economy rests on, is pretty fragile at the moment because people literally don't have the money. Either they think they don't or they actually don't have the money to spend on fun stuff.
Back to Kate Hardcastle, who is joining us from the US. Kate, I think it's worth saying that these are March numbers. So Russia invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February. So in March, we already had higher food prices, higher fuel prices, and so on. But what we didn't have in March was the increase in household utility bills, which Jasmine just mentioned, which only happened in April. So with the best will in the world, while we don't want to be too alarmist here, it strikes me that these March numbers are not going to be improved upon in April, and the April consumer confidence numbers, which came out from GfK today, would seem to bear that out.
I think we've got to be realistic that there's going to be perhaps a little bit more buoyancy in that confidence over the summer months. And one of the key drivers to that is the fact that surely the weather might change. And when the weather changes, people won't feel the need to hit the heating buttons in the house. They'll be trying to enjoy some of the summer. People have had 2 years now plus of restricted times to meet families, take holidays, go on day trips, etc. And quite rightly, people who can afford that will still want that in their lives. My biggest concern, and I was down at the Ideal Home Show for a month in March talking to the public about this day in, day out, how were they feeling, what were they doing to make those changes? And they were being very savvy and very knowledgeable about those small changes you can make, turning the thermostat down a little bit, trying to make provisions, buying more tin goods in the food shop, etc. But the reality is, my biggest fear is autumn, Liam. That's really when we're going to feel the pinch once again, because we're going to see that fuel cap really start to impact families. We're going to see families trying to adjust any spending they've had over the summer period, facing into the Christmas period, which is always a pressurised spend. And the reality is we've got a lot of hard-pressed households already using food banks more than ever before. I was at a food bank recently talking about how their own volunteers were supplementing the foods and goods there out of their own pocket because they just couldn't meet demand. The reality is we are in a real crunch situation. The impact that will always have on retail and hospitality is that people are sensible. They will do what they can for their own families, their own households to get in control of that. There is support that is required and needed. But I think without sounding alarmist or doomsdayers, yes, I think we probably are yet to see the real impact, which is going to come later in the autumn.
Well, Kate Hardcastle, you're going to leave us now. Enjoy the rest of your time in the US. We look forward to seeing you back in the UK soon. We're going to carry on this discussion over the break. How can we rescue this slump in UK retail sales? We've got Kate Nichols, the CEO of UK Hospitality, Jasmine Birtles in the studio. More guests will be joining us after the break. So stay with us. You're on the money.